be here. My name is Mark Chick, manager, large project manager, and salesperson for the Southwest for Bucher Vaslin. I've been working with Bucher products since 1988, so I have a little bit of history with them. Today, we're going to talk about our presses and other equipment, but we're focusing on the presses that use our color touchscreen called ICS or IT controls, which is an icon-based color touchscreen. If you can use an iPhone or an Android, you can run a Bucher press. This is basically a synoptic or a picture of the screen here. When you information available, if you look on the very top bar where it says header banner, that bar tells you the information of what the press is doing currently, whether it's in filling mode or pressing mode, emptying mode, what the status is of the juice distribution system, time, pressure. Then on the bar below it, this bar here that I'm highlighting, you get to select between your filling modes, your pressing modes, and every time you click one of these buttons, the entire scene changes. So for instance, when you're in filling mode, you can tell you want to go doors up, then you can open and close the doors, you can open and close your juice drain valves, and then you can select when you're filling how you want to behave. If you want to rotate the press a bit to level it out, this rocking tab here will rock to the right, rock to the left, and come back up so that you're not dumping all your grapes on the ground, for example. Then it also allows you to go into modes where you can close the doors and you can rotate it to level it out. So those are all your filling functions. Also, it tells you what the current pressure is, what your extracted volumes are, if you've got a flow meter, because there are a lot of options on the Bucher, so not everybody has every option. On the second set of tabs, when you click down on the working bar here, you get all your function buttons. So you can adjust your date and time, you can adjust the screen, you can clean the screen, you can change the sensitivity of the screen, you can control juice directions and maceration. So all your different settings are adjusted with the second tab. The third tab gives you a full process history. So if you've been running the press for a while, you can go back and look at all your process history. You can see what programs you ran, when you started them, when you stopped them. So it gives you a process history of 500 lines. So when you hit 500 lines, obviously the oldest one gets removed and the newest one replaces. So it's a really great tool for winemakers that want to go back and see the history of how they've worked the press and the different functions they've run on the press. Next bar down here gives you fault history, and this is especially good for the maintenance personnel. If you've got a repeated fault on the press, you can go back and kind of see what the timeline is on that, what causes that fault. But more importantly, they can go back and when there's a fault, they can look at it. That fault will actually tell them what the problem is and where to find it. As we get into the programs, and there'll be more details as we go, but as we get into the program, you can see that our fault system will actually guide the maintenance personnel to not only what the fault is, but where on the press to find that problem and fix it, whether it's a safety circuit or a pressure overload or something like that. This system will help them find that. And then finally, there are all the settings. We've got maintenance settings. You can open and close the doors. You can rotate left, you can rotate right. The maintenance personnel can look at all the inputs and outputs of the computer screens, of the input and output modules on the screens. There are synoptics where you can see a graph of your process flows, what you've done, your pressures and your flows. You can also, if you've got multiple presses or if you want to view the data offline, you can save the data to a USB stick. And then these two on the bottom are secured. These are password protected functions that we can set configurations on the press. And we can actually go in and we can physically drive different operations on the press. For instance, we can force a door to open or force a door to close using these passwords. Obviously, these aren't passwords we give out lightly to anybody. but they are there for service and diagnosis. So from the operator perspective, you've got your work and your general maintenance, such as running into cleaning modes. A winemaker, you get to go into your pressing programs, whether they're sequential or static or organ settings, or even intertease. If you've got an intertease press, we've got the different maintenance settings, and then the troubleshooting and faults. For the operator, when we start the screen up, one of the first things you can do is you control in your filling mode. So obviously, first thing you can do with the press is fill it. So you need to take it door up, which you can do with these controls. And then we've got the options to rotate, as I said before, and control the operation of your your juice wave valves. In the pressing modes, you get to select whether you're running in sequential. We have 4 different modes of operating our press in pressing modes. We've got the static program, which is strictly a time-based program. It's the way Buchers were first programmed back in the 80s and 70s. Then we've got sequential modes, which we can select with this button here. We've got organ, which is our intelligent pressing, which I strongly urge each of you to give that a try. Our organ system uses an algorithm that is fantastic, and once most winemakers that I get to try that end up using that the majority of the time. And then you can also select into the intertease modes for those that have intertease. And so during pressing, you can tell to press or intertease. And during pressing, you can interrupt the press, and you can tell to go door up by selecting this button. You can tell to go door up and take a look inside the press and see what the must is looking like and check the characteristics of it. So you can tell to go door up, then you can open the door and look. Then by pressing the pressing start button, it will resume and pick up where it left off. Anytime during any of our automatic processes, if you hit the stop button one time, the press will pause. Will not end the program. It will just pause the program. So let's say you need to change hoses, you can just pause the cycle by hitting the stop button. Then by hitting your start button, you can go again. If you hit the stop button a second time, that cancels your program and takes you back to start. So you've got the ability to pause the program. So as I say, if you've got a valve you need to change, or a hose or a tank, you're able to do that. In the emptying modes, we've got different ways to empty the press, again, depending whether you got a 1-door or 2-door presses. If you're dumping into half-ton bins, you can open the door partially and rotate the press until the bin's full, then stop. If you've got an automated system with an auger, we can program the dumping system with either 1 or 2 doors to open the doors gradually. So for instance, you can rotate 3 times with the door open a quarter of the way. Then you can program it to, after those 3 times, open the door another to halfway, and so on, to match the rate of your pumice discharge system. Programs available for doing that. And then in the washing cycle, the washing mode, for those of you that have auto wash, automatically inflates the membrane to cover the door, the drain channels, and it will inject air, water in sequence to flush the back side of the drain channels out. It is not CIP. It will not make your press nice and sterile and pristine inside. It just blows all the loose stuff off behind the drain channels. So it's a great thing to do at the end of the day. Still, once a week, you should go into the press and clean the press thoroughly, at least once a week, depending on, on your needs and how you guys want to deal with your press. But again, this system also, if you've got our high pressure washer system, it allows you to then engage the remote control that's on the back side of the press, so you can go 1 channel at a time and inject the high pressure washer using this switch here that's on the back of the press to go behind the drain channels and clean behind your drain channels. In your manual tank controls, on the very bottom switch, this bottom, you can go in your tank controls and you can rotate press that wants to move the door, that you want to move the doors. It has to be in the door up position. You cannot open or close doors if the press is not in the upright position. The nice thing about that is it keeps you from accidentally dumping your load on the floor. If you realize that you started to rotate and you need to you forgot to close the door, you can rotate in the opposite direction, take it back to door up, then close your doors. In this mode also, if you've got a remote axial fill, you can open and close your axial fill valve by using this button here, and you'll get a sign saying, indicating that right now it's closed. When it's open, you'll actually see these dots here move forward into the press. So that indicates, you can tell on the screen whether your press's axial fill valve is open or closed. It will also tell you on the panel where your doors are, whether they're open, closed. Just this is not live connected to press, so I can't show you, but it will tell you the position of the doors. You can see if your doors are open or closed or somewhere in between. So if when you're dumping the press, you can see that door 1 is open 25%, door 2 is closed all the way, or whatever combination that is. It gives you a lot of information for from the drain, from the control panel, so you don't even have to go back and look. It's always good to confirm, but you can see where your press is in cycle. Programming the press for pressing. When we go to the settings button, as I said, you can adjust your date and time and your screen. But the big thing here is for your pressing programs, sequential programs, static and orgone programs. The sequential program is, as I said before, it is the old way that we used to program presses. There are still a lot of customers that like to run their presses this way. It gives them a very definite time of when things will be done. Static programs allow you to regulate every single step of the pressing process, how long it drains, what pressures go to, how many rotations. You have full control over the press in static. And in orgone, as I said before, it uses an algorithm that Bucher created, and that's with a lot of years of experience behind this. The press will make the decisions for you based on criteria. You can give it a maximum time, a maximum pressure, and tell what kind of grapes you've got in there, the characteristic of the grapes, and it will make all the decisions for you. And I have almost every customer that uses it says it will press faster with a better yield and lower solids than anything they try to program themselves. So I strongly urge you to try out the orgone and see if it works well for you. So in our static program, this is the one that I was telling, this is how we've programmed presses for the last 30 some odd years. We set this first section here is what's called T0. This is just your pure drain time. So for 10 minutes in this instance here, for 10 minutes, it's going to drain for 2 minutes. It's zero pressure with the drains down, then make one rotation, and then go back to drain for 2 more minutes, and it'll keep doing that for a total of 10 minutes. So it gets rid of all your free run juice, so that when you start pressing, there's less juice in the press. There is a lower chance of plugging drain channels or clogging the screens, and you'll actually get a better yield and a faster process if you get the free run juice out first. The second section here, T4, this is your low pressure time. So that's it, this section in green. So it just stays at 0.2 bar or whatever we've set for it. And yes, somebody asked if I'll go into the orgone option. I will definitely go more into orgone option as we get there in the program. So have patience, I'll get there. Then in the second section, so excuse me, I've got it interrupted there. In T4, so at T4, you're at low pressure. So for 2 minutes, it's going to hold pressure. It's going to rotate once. And then after that 10 minutes, it's going to go into what's called T5A. So this first section of time here, this ramp for 20 minutes, it's going to hold this pressure, it's going to hold pressure for 4 minutes, then rotate 2 times. And in this, over this 20 minutes, it's going to make it from the 0.2 bar here and ramp up to within 20 minutes up to 1 bar. Then you can break that into second section for another 20 minutes or whatever you want. You can go up to 99 minutes in this. You're going to go from at 4 minutes, you're going to hold pressure, rotate twice, but the press will figure out how often it needs to increase pressure to get to your 1.8 bars in this range here in that 20 minutes. Then T6, and we can go up, by the way, we can go as high as 2 bar. In T6, then it will spend 25 minutes at whatever your highest pressure was, your P2 pressure. For 4 minutes, it'll hold pressure, then rotate twice, and so on. So that is, as I said, it's purely pressure and time based. One of the nice things about this is, for instance, in this one, it tells you that's 1 minute or 1 hour and 25 minutes, and it's going to be done. So it's a very definite type program. And here we go. Here is just kind of an example of how the press cycles work in static mode. So you got your TO, which is 0 pressure, T4 at low pressure, your pressure increase section of T5A, a different ramp at T5, and then your final pressure at T6. And so all your times are pretty much definite by using this program. All the different steps. So for instance, you can have first step at 0.05 bar, second step at 0.1, and so on. And you can enter all of your pressure hold times, your rotations, and how many times you repeat. Now repeats, here's an important feature for everybody to understand is our repeat system. When we run a repeat, so for instance, right here, it says repeat twice. It's not going to repeat just this twice. It will do 2 times. It's going to go back to the previous time that it did a repeat. So since there were no previous repeats, it's going to run this whole series all the way back to sequence 1, a total of 3 times. Let's do it once, then repeat it twice. So it's going to run this entire sequence, kind of like a Cremont cycle, 2 times. And in this example here, so from program 4 to program 6, there are no repeats, but there's a repeat at 7. So it's going to repeat this phase here 1 more time. So you get that twice, not just that 1 pressure. It's highly advisable. You don't have to, but it's highly advisable after you've done rotation to step back 1 pressure, as in this green one here. If you finished off at 0.4, have your next one start at 0.3 or slightly lower pressure. You'll actually get a better yield and a faster process. Better yields almost always end up in faster process. So our goal here is to increase the flow of your juice. There we go. Oh, the screen's out of phase. Sorry, folks. This is okay. So for instance, in your sequential programs, and by the way, on your programs, we've got 9 programs in sequential, and you can put a name on them. So for instance, if you wanted to call this whole cluster reds or whole cluster whites, whatever you wanted to name it, Pinot Noir program, by default, our program 1 is a red program. By default, program 2 is Cremont, but you can go in and adjust those all you want. So we've got sequence 1 on this example here. This is a good program. 0 bar, is going to drain for 1 minute, then rotate once, and it's going to do that a total of 7 times because it's going to repeat it 6. Then we're going to 0.1 bar for 2 minutes, 1 rotation, repeat that once, and so on. And since there's a repeat before it, it's just going to repeat this 1 cycle. It's not going to repeat this one and this one because we're just going to go back to the previous repeat. There are none. So this is kind of how your system is going to look using this sequential program. You've got your different sections, 2 repeats, and 2 rotations. So The sequential is very nice for when you want to make the press do exactly what you want it to do. You've got history, you know your grapes, you know your process, this is what you want to do. It's going to give you all those functions. Then when you're ready, I'll come back to this. In the settings in Orgon, Orgon's an automatic decision-making pressurization procedure. Flow, we measure rate of change in your drain sump. So we actually have a valve on the discharge of your drain pan and a control for your pump. As the press fills the drain sump, it measures how long it takes to fill that sump. When it gets to full level, it opens the valve, turns on your pump, drains out, and then starts reading again. So we're constantly measuring rate of change. Through that rate of change, we're able to understand how the press is functioning, how the flow is happening. When that flow backs off to a point driven by the criteria that you've entered, it will decide what to do, whether it needs to rotate again or whether it needs to go to 1x higher pressure. To my understanding, and everything I've been able to gather, we are the only company that actually controls rotation of the press, as well as the as pressure and pressure hold time. So whereas most of the competition has the rotations already calculated in, our rotations will vary depending on the needs of the product in the press and the juice discharge. So the press will make all your decisions for you based on, as I said, your major criteria. So if you've got, let's say you've got a big day and you need that stuff out of there in an hour and a half, you can tell an hour and a half is your maximum time. It'll be done in an hour and a half. It'll do the best job it can in an hour and a half. If your goal is to, let's say you've got some really good Pinot Noir in there and your goal is to be really gentle, you tell the press that you want to be gentle, that you've got 3 hours to process. And in fact, you can even override that. There's one mode where you can override that and add another half hour to the process. Say, I don't care what you say, I want you to take another half hour to do it. It gives you that possibility to override that. So as I said, Orgon will make decisions pretty much better than you can for most processes. But so it's really worth playing with. But the nice feature is here, you don't have to. So the Orgon pressing selection, you've got your normal operation, which is the most commonly used pressurization algorithm. It's recommended for most first-time users just so you can get a feel for it. Then you can select gentle, which is a slow program. So as I say, if you've got Pinot Noir in there or something really fragile that you want to be careful with, or even a late harvest, some late harvests that are real ripe and juicy, others are real thick and creamy. So you can play with this. Dynamic is a faster. Dynamic is the ones where you're in a rush and you've got to get 8 press loads done that day. You've got to move it. Late harvest is a really long program. So it's gentle, slow pressurization in order not to tear the skins and maybe to extract too much mold. And then there's a Cremant Orgon, even in the Cremant mode, for doing the Orgon. And then you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 customizable programs. So you can go in and really play with those and tweak them to your specific needs. Drying. So the drying level corresponds to your grape must extraction. It's on a scale of 0 to 9. The higher the level, the drier the must. So if you really want full extraction, you want to get every drop out of that stuff because you're paying $10,000 a ton for your grapes, then you're going to want the highest level of dryness probably. But again, the dryness corresponds to extraction of other compounds from the fruit. So it gives you that kind of flexibility, that option to control what you're getting out of the press. And again, pressing time limit, you can go as high as 18 hours on pressing time. I don't know anybody that's done that, but I guess you can. If you're using infinite values, you can actually go to infinite and it's just going to keep pressing until there is 0 rate of change sensed in the sump. And when you're using max value, it's just going to go to the end of drawing or at the end of your set time, whichever occurs first. Pressure limit, this pressure setting allows you, and these are all things you can control with Orgon. You can say, hey, I don't want to go over 1.4 bar, or I want to go all the way to 2 bar, or I've got customers that they don't want to go over 1 bar. So you can set that on Orgon, and that's as high as it'll go. Depletion allows you to retain the pressure stages. That's what I was telling you before, that you can tell that, hey, I know your algorithm is going to say to stop after a certain amount of time. You can actually say, I want to go longer than that. I don't care what the algorithm says, I need to get a better yield. So it allows you to make those kind of choices and somewhat control the Orgon process. The holding time limit, if it's set to yes, it allows you to set a maximum holding for these stages between 1 minute and 3 hours to get additional drawing time. If you set to no, then you're just letting the program make all your decisions. And then, of course, if you're using thermovinified grapes, such as using our extractee systems, then Orgon can make a special algorithm just for that. So here are some examples of Orgon programs. You got your normal pricing program with a dryness of 9, maximum duration of 2.5 hours. You're going to go all the way to 2 bar. You're not worried about depletion. You're going to let the program make all your choices. Maximum hold time of pressure. You're letting if you don't have an entry here, the program will make the choices for you. So example of so these are, for instance, would be a good red grape program like Anjou, you type grapes. The second one here is if you got botrytis grapes. So you got dryness of 8. You want to go to 6 hours and you want a pressure limit of 2 bars. Depletion, yes, that means you want to override their time limits on depletion. So you're going to override by another 15 minutes and so on. So these are kind of the ideas of what you can have Orgon criteria work around for you. See, it will make the decisions. You're just giving it limits as to, or suggestions of how you want it to operate. But again, even with these settings, Orgon says, okay, this is what you're after. We'll make the best decisions based on these criteria. So to trigger an Orgon pressurization, you set your pressing system to Orgon 1, 2, or 10, whichever one you're doing, and you press the start button and it begins. Now, this tag doesn't show it, but it will tell you where in the process it is, but also tell you a guesstimate, but a very close guesstimate of how much time is elapsed and how much time is left in the program. Now, obviously in Orgon, since we're not programming times and rotations, that is much more of a rough algorithmic guesstimate than there is in the other programs, but it's going to be pretty close. Now, this key in your pressing program allows you to interrupt the press program so you can look inside. There are many times when you want to do that. Let's say you need to know, hey, how much is left on this because my tank's almost full. You can take a look inside and say, well, yeah, it's almost done. We can finish filling that tank, or you can look inside and say, hey, there's a lot left. We need to switch tanks. So just keep it paused, switch tanks. Then you can, when you're done, you can push the resume button, the pressing start button. It'll close the doors and continue the press program where it left off. And then, as I said before, if you're done and you just need to end the program, push the stop key and it ends and returns the press back to the start position. At the end of emptying, or at the end of pressing, we can go to the emptying cycles. As I said before, we've got multiple ways of doing it. We can control how much you open the door manually. And start rotating and rotate it a few times, stop it, take it door up. If you got an automatic program, then we can program. So for instance, multiple door presses. Let's say you've got a 2-door press. You can tell it that you want to open door 1 25% and leave door 2 closed, and do that for 8 rotations. After 8 rotations, you can say, okay, I want to open door 1 to 50%, and door 2 to 25%. Do that for 6 rotations, and so on. And at the end, you can have both doors open 100% for another 5 rotations, or whatever works for your automatic system. But we're able to program all these things into the press for you. The best way to do that is the very first couple of times you use the press, you kind of do it manually and get a feel for what your pumice system can handle. And I've done this with presses, with large presses, and I have been able to successfully empty 32,000 liter presses on automatic systems in about 14 minutes. And it's complete. There's not even 2 gallons worth of pumice inside. So the system works really well. You just have to figure out what the rate is that your system can pull from. So here's an example of that here. You got door 1. You can open it whatever percentage you want to. Door 2, whatever percentage you want to. It'll hold that for however many minutes you have set in here, however many minutes you have set in here to the next stage, so on. So you can open the door sequentially and independently for one another. So I've got some customers that have 2 door presses, but they only have a pumice discharge system on 1 door. So you just keep the second door closed at all times. It never opens completely on a dump system. So it gives you that kind of flexibility to work with whatever you've got. We can match that. And then, of course, if you're just dumping into half-ton bins, we're not going to use the automatic system. We're going to go fully manual and just regulate how far the door is open. And then you'll rotate until your bin's full. You take a back door up and you put another bin under it. So during your system, during the automatic dumping system, you've got an indication here of where your doors are, what percentage are open, if at all. And if you need to interrupt it, again, you can interrupt, take a look, or you can continue. Let's see. Okay, I had somebody on the Orgon option. Again, the Orgon option system works really well for almost anything that you want to do. I'm sorry I just got this system. You can use the Orgon option for almost everything you do. It's just when you know that there's something that you don't have better than our press. And I know winemakers, you know your fruit better than we do. On the manual door, it won't hurt the door to only open it partially during dumping. No, it will not hurt on a manual door to only open it partially. In fact, if you open it fully, you're going to just bury your half-ton bins. So I would definitely recommend opening the door just usually about 25% for the first few rotations. And in fact, to break up your cake after pressing, it wouldn't hurt to just leave the doors closed and rotate the press 3 or 4 times to break everything up. Then open your door 15-25% and see how that dumps into your bins. That way you're getting your dumping to start right away, but you're not burying your bins. And yeah, it's nice to keep how much you have to shovel off the floor to a minimum. Oh, there we go. Controlling the emptying on the ICS, again, we've got the emptying mode. You can rotate left, rotate right. When you're not using the automatic system, we can do it manually. So you can rotate left, you can rotate door up. We can deflate the door seal or inflate the door seal so that you can open them. When you got just manual doors or even electric doors, that have a jack. This way we can open and close the doors and dump into your bins and regulate how far things are opening. So this is for manual emptying, for those that don't have the luxury of an expensive pumice removal system. During pressing, especially on the newer IT presses, which has been about the last 2 to 3 years now, we've got a synoptic. So during pressing, you can actually see the condition of the press to see how much is in the press, how much is void, how much is actually product is left in there. It tells you the pressure inside the tank and gives you a status of all your filling valves. For instance, in this synoptic here, it shows you that your axial fill valve is closed, that your juiceway valves are closed, that your air compressor and all your infeeds are closed. So right now the press is locked up, except for your juice drainage going this end into your sump. So again, the synoptic is a great tool to show you your current status of the press. This liter here, this is just a guesstimation of the volume that's currently in your juice sump. Because again, we've got it's not a flow meter. We've got a pressure sensor that tells you the level of that sump. During your pressing cycle, we've got new features that have come out in the last couple of years. If you want to step forward, let's say you're in this instance here, you're in sequential 4, but there's just no juice coming out. So you want to step forward in the program. You can either step forward, move the timing forward some with plus or minus buttons, or you can step back too. But you can step forward so you can move forward somewhat in the program, or say, hey, I just want to go to the next step. You can put this little stair step button and actually skip that step and go to the next one. So let's say you're at 0.4 bar, there's nothing coming out, you just want to go to the next 0.6 bar step. You hit this button here, you're off to your next step. So you're able to get your juice flow going again. Save some time. Again, that is not an option in orgone, it's only in sequential and in static. But this also tells you how much time is remaining in your cycle. So you've got kind of a progress bar here. So in this sample here, you're starting at the 4:55 and ending at 5:15. That's a pretty short program, but nonetheless, it's just an example. It also tells you what your pressure is and what your average flow rate is. And again, flow rate is not it's based off rate of change, not so much off of an actual flow meter. So don't use these as measurements. It's a guide. And again, so this program, you're in sequential 4, it's in cycle 1. There's 17 minutes and 47 seconds left in the program. So that's the nice thing about the Bucher IT and ICS controls, is you get a lot of information at a glance on the controls to find out what you're doing and where the press is in that particular program. For the maintenance folks, we've got a lot of things we can do on our maintenance pages. We can open the doors, we can rotate left, we can rotate right, we can open and close the axial fill valves. So those are some of the manual functions of maintenance. In the visual solving problem system, when you can take a look at the press, which is this one with the eyeball. That's actually see the status of all the different portions of the press. I'll give you a look at that in a moment, but it also, so we've got the hand button. That's the one that allows you to open, close doors, rotate. This one here will allow the maintenance people to take a look at the status of all the inputs and outputs on the PLC. Helps them in diagnostics when there's an issue with the press. And I'd love to say that Bucher presses will never break, but that would be a lie. And then there are things that give us, you can see graphs of your flow. And then these buttons down here are password protected. Therefore, configuring the press and doing manual operations on the press, that would be strictly for the maintenance personnel to undertake. And those that are qualified, we can work with. So in your visual problem solving, we can look at your pressing, we can look at what your pressure status is, your rotation status. So we get a lot of information available to the operators and to the maintenance people on all of these. You can see the status of and I love the eyeball, but you see the status of your axial fill valve, the status of your juiceway valves, your must distribution valves, and so on. One thing that I talked about was on maintenance. When there's an issue with a press, it will actually highlight where in the press is detecting that fault. So that will help the operator to find out where the issues are and resolve them. So for instance, in this one here, it's showing that there's a fault with the flow meter. So on certain presses, especially with the intertees, there could be a fault there, and it will actually highlight where the fault is. If there's a circuit breaker issue, if you pop the circuit breaker, it will show a red flag up in the control panel. So it will show that there's a circuit breaker tripped, and it will say Q101 or whatever breaker is tripped. It will actually come up with an indication on the fault screen showing you what's tripped. So for the maintenance people, this is a great tool. And one of the takeaways on the Bucher press is when you're working with the programs, don't be afraid to push buttons. You can always, unless you save a program change, it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. You can just hit the little door and escape. So unless you've hit the button that shows the little floppy drive, unless you're saving it, you can make all the changes in the world of program, and you're not going to save it unless you save it. So you can always say, hey, I want to back out and just go out the door and undo what you did. So don't be afraid to push the buttons. If you've got any issues, you can call us first. And ask questions. We're always happy to answer questions. Obviously, when we do commission your press, when we come out there, we'll go over this stuff in more detail. This is to give you a quick overview of what the presses have to offer and how you can best function with them. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I'm going to work on changing over to a different mode if I can get this to change that different screen for me. So if you'll bear with me a moment. Okay. So here is a different view of the presses. So this is what we call a simulator. So there's not everything I can do because it doesn't have inputs and outputs connected to it. So, but for instance, when you're in the manual mode, you can rotate left, you can rotate right, you can rotate door up. Whenever you want to change what the press is doing, is say, are you sure the door's closed? And then you hit yes and continue. If you're in these settings here, let's say, oh, by the way, if let's say, oh, I got a guy here who speaks French, so and all of a sudden all your functions are in French, or if you want Spanish, or if you want Japanese. The press speaks multiple languages, but for now, let's just stick to English. You can adjust your date and time if that's not correct. It's always asks you if you want to save. You say yes or no. For your screen, you can either calibrate your sensitivity, or if you want to just clean the screen, you push this button and for 15 seconds, it turns off the sensitivity so that you can clean the screen without moving your cursor around. Sequential programs. So as I was telling you, we can go in and play with the programs here, and you can see if you've made a mistake. Let's say you actually hit 2 instead of 0.2, you can see a graphic that, oh, that's not right. So it's really nice that you can go back and correct your mistakes. And you can see where you've made changes that make sense or don't make sense. So it really is a good program. And so here's a command program. And the nice thing is you can change these things. Oh, gee, I misspelled that. I can go back and fix that. So you can go back and name it. That's my bad. Anyway, as you can see, you can change that program to 2, 3, 4, or 5, 6, 7, or anything you want to. So it is nice, and it also tells you just at a glance how long that presses program is going to be. You've got basically a 3-hour program here on your standard command program. And if you don't want to save what you did, you go out. So do you want to save these modifications? No, So it goes back to where it was. So we go back to 2. Come on, see, everything's back to where it was, not the 334 or anything like that. Unless you save it, it's not going to save. So don't be afraid to push buttons. You're not going to hurt anything. And unfortunately, since we don't have the inputs and outputs connected on these simulators, I can't show you the organ. It's grayed out because we're not able to use that without the input of the level sensors and such that we use in the organ system. In your static programs, as I said, you can adjust everything within this. If you want a longer drain time, you can change that drain time. If you want a longer pre-juicing time, you can have a longer pre-juicing time. If you want to change this ramp up time here, let's say you want to go 35 minutes. We'll change that ramp. And again, you've got your time required to run that program shown up here. So lots of different information, lots of things you have to play with. And let's say you want to make that 50, you can make that 50. So you can, again, even like on the static, you can see that your program makes sense or doesn't make sense for what you're trying to do. If you don't like what you've just done, as long as you haven't hit save, you can back out of it. Once you hit save, it's there. But right now, let's say I really don't like what I've done. Back out of it. No, I don't want to save. There we go. Maceration. We for those people that get maceration systems on their press, you control how long it will, your homogenization time. So let's say you want to hold for 3 minutes, and then rotate 2 times, and it'll keep doing that until you tell it to do something differently. But that gives you your maceration. And again, do you want to save the modifications? Yes or no. If you don't want to save, just say no. Emptying. Here's where I was telling you we can adjust your emptying time. Let's say I want to go 15 minutes this way. Well, I can change that to 5 minutes. And we want to change this 2%, 100%, whatever. We're able to make all those adjustments. And if, again, it's going to give you how much time is going to, pretty much how much time is going to lapse to do those changes. And save it. And exit. It's emptying, maceration, static programs, filling. We're able to adjust TA and TB time. That's left and right rotations. So when you're filling, say for axial filling, you can have it stop in one position, what's called, we call TA. So let's say where the doors are up for 30 seconds, then they'll rotate the next position, which is drains fully down for 50 seconds, and then keep going back and forth like that between those 2 positions. So you can adjust how long it spans at each draining position during your axial fill process. Here's your process history. So it just gives you a good view of what your process history has been. So you can go back, as I say, to, I guess I connect anything, but you can see you've done down to 500 lines of entry. Fault history, so powering up, door positioning, things like that. If there's a fault, for instance, right, if you've been trying to run doors and it was taking too long to open or too long to close, it's going to fault out because it says, okay, it should take no more than, let's say, 30 seconds to close the door and initiate the seal. If it takes longer than that, you're going to get a fault. So again, for the maintenance people, this gives the maintenance people a lot of information. And then we come back to all the different manual functions, left, right. Here's the operators can see what the status is of their input-output modules. Second input-output module. And so on. I'm not going to, I can actually go in and drive those modules. I'm not going to do that here because I really don't want people to necessarily see what the passwords are. I can work with specific personnel to get that done. During pressing, you can actually get a graph for the winemakers. They can check out their flow versus time. And so they get a very good synoptic of what their process has been, which can be a really handy tool. Well, now it's not going to escape from me. So the thing. Okay, well, I think the program is locked up for me, folks. And that's the fun of simulators. Well, I'm sorry. There we go. It finally escaped from me. Okay, also then this I button just gives you information on your press. It tells you what, so for instance, this is an X plus 80 with 2 doors, high pressure washer, 2 juice ways, 1 waterway, integrated compressor. And then if you want to save your functions to a USB stick, so let's say you got multiple presses, you can save your programs to a USB stick and put that in another press and import all those press programs from your USB stick. So we've got customers that have like 6, 7, 8 presses. This is really handy because if you have programs that work, you'd only have to program 1 press, then copy that to the rest of them. Or you want to do some service on the press, you can just make sure that you save those programs. This just gives you history of your work details, your filling cycles, your pressing cycles, your history of your work details, criterion on volumes, or what your criteria were for S1, S2 for these different functions. And that's about it. So I hope this helped a lot of you to better understand how to use your presses.